Maribel, now 70, wiped flour from her wrinkled hands. Her small bakery in rural Oregon was her sanctuary. For 30 years, she had been Naoma, the kind woman with a quiet past who sold the best sourdough in town. Then, she saw his face on the small television mounted above the counter. He was older, grayer, but the eyes were the same. The news banner read, "Father Oswin, the People's Priest, celebrates 50 years of service." The bakery's warmth vanished, replaced by an icy cold she hadn't felt in decades. The smell of fresh bread soured, and in her mind, it was replaced by the cloying scent of old incense and floor wax. Her hand trembled, rattling the coffee mug she was holding. A young customer, a regular named Trina, looked at her with concern. "Naoma? Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," Maribel whispered, her voice a dry rasp she didn't recognize. The man on the screen, Father Oswin, was smiling, accepting applause from the mayor. He was being called a pillar of the community, a man of God. But Maribel knew what he was. She knew the truth of what happened at the St. Jude's Convent. The reporter listed his accomplishments. He had saved the struggling convent, guiding it through a difficult transition after a terrible scandal. Maribel felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. He hadn't guided it. He had shattered it. He had buried a secret so dark it had cost 4 young women their lives, their names, and their futures. For 30 years, she had kept the vow of silence. Not the one she took before God, but the one she made to the other sisters the night they clawed their way over the convent wall. Never tell. Never look back. Survive. But seeing his face, celebrated and adored, broke something deep inside her. The silence was no longer a shield, it was a prison. Trina was still watching her, her brow furrowed. "Naoma, you're scaring me." "What's wrong?" Maribel looked at the young woman, who was the same age she had been, before. "My name," she said, her voice gaining a sudden, steely strength, "is not Naoma. It is Maribel." She untied the strings of her flour-dusted apron, her movements sharp and deliberate. She walked to the front door and flipped the open sign to closed, the small bell chiming a final, lonely note in the sudden silence. "I was a nun at St. Jude's," she announced to the empty room. "The one they said ran away. The one they said was troubled and unstable." Trina's eyes were wide. "What are you doing? Where are you going?" Maribel grabbed her coat from the hook. "Father Oswin is not a saint," she said, her voice shaking with a cold, righteous anger that had been dormant for 3 decades. "He is a monster. And I am going to prove it." She looked back at the television, where the man was still smiling. "They all believed we vanished. Some said we were dead. But the truth is far worse." She opened the bakery door, the cold Oregon air hitting her face. "He didn't just bury a secret," she said to Trina, and to the world. "He buried a person." The bus ride to her old hometown in upstate New York took 3 days. Maribel watched the green hills of Oregon turn into the flat plains of the Midwest, and finally, the familiar, dense forests of the East Coast. With every mile, the carefully constructed life of Naoma fell away, leaving the raw, terrified 24-year-old she had been. She remembered arriving at St. Jude's, so full of faith. The convent was beautiful, a stone fortress of peace against the world. Father Oswin was the spiritual guide, handsome and charismatic. He took a special interest in the young nuns. He called them his chosen flowers. One nun, Sister Cassidy, was the brightest of them all. She was funny, kind, and had a voice that made the angels weep during Vespers. Oswin's interest in Cassidy was different. He would call her for private spiritual counseling that lasted for hours. Maribel, who was Cassidy's only confidant, saw the light in her friend's eyes dim with each passing week. He prays with me," Cassidy would lie, her hands twisting in the folds of her habit. But Maribel saw the fear. She saw the way Cassidy flinched when Oswin's voice echoed in the hall. Maribel's bus finally pulled into the station. The town was smaller than she remembered, the buildings more worn. She stepped onto the cracked pavement, a small duffel bag in her hand, a ghost returning to her own grave. She was a stranger here now. She walked toward the old town square, her heart pounding. She had to start somewhere. The local police station. She needed to know what the official story was. As she crossed the street, a man stepped out of the sheriff's office. He was older, with a weary face and a familiar set of eyes. He stopped, staring at her. "My God," the man whispered, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. "It can't be. Maribel?" Maribel's blood ran cold. It was Lowell. Her childhood friend, the boy she had known before the convent, before everything. He took a step toward her, his face pale with shock. We buried you, Maribel. The town buried you. They said you took your own life." Lowell's words hit Maribel like a physical blow. "Buried me? What are you talking about?" "Come inside," he said, his voice low, grabbing her arm and pulling her into the small sheriff's station. He looked different. The easy smile she remembered was gone, replaced by the hard lines of a man who had seen too much. He led her to his office and shut the door. 30 years ago," he said, his voice rough, "they found a body in the river. It was decomposed. But it had your habit, your rosary. The Mother Superior identified you. Father Oswin gave the eulogy. It was ruled a suicide." Maribel sank into a chair, her mind spinning. A fake body. A fake funeral. They hadn't just covered up her escape, they had erased her. It was a message. If she ever came back, she was already dead. "That wasn't me, Lowell. I ran. 4 of us ran." "4?" he asked, his cop's suspicion kicking in. "The report only mentioned you, the troubled one." "It was a lie, Lowell. Oswin, he's a monster. He's the reason we ran. He hurt Sister Cassidy." Lowell's face hardened. "Hurt how?" "Maribel, these are serious accusations. Father Oswin is the most powerful man in this county. He's untouchable." "Because he's a liar," she cried, her voice cracking. "He's the reason I'm here. I saw him on TV. I have to tell the truth." Lowell sighed, running a hand over his face. "The truth? After 30 years? All you have is the word of a dead woman. He has a town that adores him. You have nothing." "I know what I saw," she insisted, leaning forward. "Cassidy, she was terrified of him. Then she disappeared. The night we ran, she was supposed to come with us. But she was gone." Lowell stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the town that Oswin practically owned. "You need to understand something," he said, his back to her. "You're not just digging up an old story, Maribel." He turned, his eyes filled with a warning so cold it chilled her to the bone. "You're digging up a grave they already filled. You keep digging, and they will put you in it for good." Maribel left the station, Lowell's warning echoing in her ears. She checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town, the neon sign buzzing like an angry wasp. She was alone. Lowell wouldn't help her, not yet. She needed proof. She lay on the lumpy bed, the thin blanket pulled to her chin, and let the memory she had suppressed for 30 years finally surface. It was the week before the escape. Cassidy had come to her room, her face as white as her wimple. She was shaking, her eyes wild with terror. "I'm pregnant, Maribel," she whispered, the words falling like stones in the silent room. "It's his. It's Oswin's." Maribel felt the floor drop out from under her. He forced you?" Cassidy broke down, sobbing into her hands. "He said it was God's will. That I was chosen. At first, I believed him. But then, it became violent. He said if I ever told, he would have me sent to a place for the spiritually sick. He said no one would ever believe me. But the pregnancy changed everything. I'm going to the bishop, Cassidy said, a new, fierce resolve in her eyes. I'm meeting him in secret. I've been writing everything down. In my diary. I have dates. I have everything. He can't hide this. He'll destroy you, Maribel warned. He won't, Cassidy said, clutching her small, wooden cross. The truth will protect me. That was the last time Maribel saw her. 2 nights later, the night of the planned escape, Cassidy never showed up at their meeting spot. Maribel and the other 2 sisters waited, their hearts pounding with every crack of a twig. Finally, Maribel crept back to Cassidy's cell. The room was empty. It was too clean, the bed perfectly made, as if she had never been there. But Maribel knew Cassidy. She knew where she kept her diary, a loose floorboard beneath her cot. She knelt, her fingers prying at the wood. It was empty. The diary was gone. Maribel felt a cold dread. She stood up, her eyes scanning the room. That's when she saw it. On the floor, glinting in the moonlight, was a single, black rosary bead. It was from the expensive rosary Father Oswin always carried. And next to it, on the clean stone floor, was a small, distinct smudge of fresh, dark mud. Back in the motel room, the memory solidified Maribel's resolve. The diary was the key. If Oswin had taken it, he had incriminated himself. But if he missed it, she had to get back into the convent. She remembered Trina, the girl from the bakery. She called her. Trina, she said, her voice low. I need you to look up something for me. The St. Jude's Convent. Is it still open? An hour later, Trina called back. It's not a convent anymore, Maribel. It was decommissioned in 2005. It's a local historical site. The Father Oswin Center for Community Heritage. He owns it. Of course, he did. He controlled the narrative, right down to the bricks and mortar. Are there visiting hours? Maribel asked. Tours end at 4 p.m., Trina said. The security is supposedly light. Just a night watchman. Why? Thank you, Trina. Don't worry about me. I'm just visiting an old friend. That night, Maribel dressed in dark clothes. The convent was on a hill overlooking the town. The high stone wall was still there, but the gate was new, with a simple keypad. She slipped into the woods, following the old path they had planned for their escape. She came to the back wall, where the kitchens used to be. A service door, old and wooden. The lock was new, but the frame was ancient. She used a small crowbar from the motel's emergency kit and the rotted wood splintered with a soft crack. She was in. The air was cold and musty, smelling of polish and decay. Moonlight streamed through the high windows, painting the hallway in silver and black. She moved silently, a ghost in her own home. She went to the old dormitory wing. The cells were still there, set up as exhibits. She found Cassidy's room. A small plaque on the door read, "A sister's quarters." She slipped inside, her heart hammering. She went to the cot. She knelt. Her fingers found the edges of the same loose floorboard. She pulled. It gave way. Her breath caught. She reached into the dark, dusty space beneath. It wasn't empty. Her fingers didn't find a diary. They closed around a small, cold, metal object. She pulled it into the moonlight. It was a tarnished silver locket. It wasn't Cassidy's. Inside, there was no picture. Just a tiny, folded piece of paper. Her hands shaking, she unfolded it. The note had 3 neatly typed words, "I'm still watching." A sound. A footstep on the stone floor outside the cell. Maribel froze, clutching the locket. The night watchman. She scrambled to her feet and slid behind the heavy wooden door, pressing herself flat against the wall. The beam of a flashlight cut across the room, sweeping over the cot, the empty floorboard space, and then out. The footsteps receded down the hall. Maribel didn't breathe until she heard the distant slam of a door. She fled the way she came, the crowbar and the locket heavy in her pockets. The note was a clear message. This was a trap. Oswin knew she was here. He had been waiting for her. She burst into her motel room, locking the deadbolt and chain. She was terrified, but also furious. He was playing with her. He was enjoying this. She had to get to Lowell. But before she could grab her coat, there was a knock. A firm, polite rap. She froze. "Who is it?" A friend of Father Oswin's, a smooth, calm voice replied. "He's very concerned about you, Maribel. He'd like to help you." She looked through the peephole. A man in an expensive suit stood there, holding a briefcase. He didn't look like a priest. He looked like a lawyer. "Go away," she said, her voice shaking. "The Father is a forgiving man," the voice continued, still calm, still polite. "He understands you're confused. You've been through a trauma. He is prepared to offer you a substantial sum. Enough to ensure your comfort. Go back to Oregon. Live your life. Forget this." "I'm not for sale," Maribel spat, her back against the door. The man sighed. "That's what Sister Cassidy said." The blood drained from Maribel's face. "He warned her," the man said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He gave her every chance to be quiet. To be reasonable. You're a ghost, Maribel. Ghosts don't get to make demands." There was a soft thud as he dropped something on the doormat. A token of his good faith. "Think it over." She waited until she heard his footsteps disappear. Her hands trembling, she opened the door. On the worn mat was a small, velvet bag. She opened it. Inside was a single, black rosary bead. Maribel grabbed the locket and the bead and ran. She didn't stop until she burst into the sheriff's station, wild-eyed and shaking. Lowell was at his desk, and he jumped to his feet. "He found me, Lowell. He knew I was here. He sent a man, he threatened me." She slammed the locket and the bead on his desk. "He left this. It's from his rosary. The same one I saw in her room." Lowell looked at the items. He looked at her terror. The skepticism in his eyes finally broke. "All right," he said, his voice grim. "All right, Maribel. I believe you. Sit down." He made a call. "Get a unit to the Trails End Motel, room 114. Check for a man in a suit. Run the plates on any high-end sedans." He hung up. "They won't find him. These guys are professionals." "So what do we do?" she asked, her voice small. "We do my job," he said. He went to a filing cabinet and pulled a thick, dusty binder. The Jane Doe file. From 1995. The one they identified as you. He opened it. The report was thin. Cause of death, drowning. Case closed. The Mother Superior identified the body, Lowell said, reading. And the report was signed by the coroner and the deputy on scene. The deputy. Jareth. That was Oswin's cousin. He retired rich a year later. "It's a conspiracy," Maribel whispered. "It's a cover-up," Lowell corrected. "But we still have no proof of what really happened to Cassidy. Her body's not in that grave. Yours is. Or someone's. The Jane Doe." Maribel said, her mind racing. The one they called me. What if that was Cassidy all along? Lowell stared at her. He wouldn't be that sloppy. Wouldn't he? Maribel said. He's arrogant. He'd want the body found, but misidentified. He'd want the case closed. He'd bury his victim in plain sight, using my name. Lowell's phone rang. He listened, his face growing paler. Understood. He hung up. What is it? Maribel asked. My unit got to the motel. The man in the suit is long gone. Lowell grabbed his keys, his face a mask of cold fury. But the motel clerk who checked you in? He was just found in the alley. A hit and run. He's dead. He's cleaning up, Lowell said, his voice dangerously quiet. He's cutting every tie. The clerk, the deputy, anyone who knew. He turned to Maribel. You are in mortal danger. I'm not leaving, Maribel said. Not until he pays. Then we have to move fast, Lowell said. If you're right, if Jane Doe is really Cassidy, we need to prove it. We need an exhumation order. They drove to the county courthouse, a place Maribel had never seen. The air was thick with tension. Lowell, in his uniform, carried a new authority. He was no longer the skeptical friend, he was the sheriff. They filed the emergency petition with a county judge. Exhuming a 30-year-old suicide? The judge asked, looking over his glasses. On what grounds, Sheriff? On the grounds that the victim wasn't Jane Doe, Your Honor, Lowell said. And it wasn't suicide. It was murder. And the woman who was supposedly buried in that grave is standing right next to me. The judge's eyes widened. He looked from Lowell to Maribel. He was about to speak when the door to his chambers opened. I apologize for the intrusion, Your Honor. Maribel turned. Her heart stopped. Father Oswin stood in the doorway, flanked by two men in expensive suits. He was older, his hair white, but his posture was ramrod straight. He looked at Maribel, and a slow, cold smile spread across his face. Sister Maribel, he said, his voice as smooth and hypnotic as she remembered. What a joy to see you've returned from the dead. I must say, this is a most unexpected resurrection. One of his lawyers stepped forward, handing a file to the judge. Your Honor, this woman is a known fugitive. She is mentally unstable. This is a 30-year-old vendetta. Father Oswin is a pillar of this community. This circus is an outrage. He's a murderer. Maribel shouted. Oswin just looked at her, his eyes full of pity. The poor dear. She's clearly unwell. She needs prayer. She needs rest. This petition is baseless, the lawyer said. We're filing for a restraining order. This woman is not to come within 500 feet of Father Oswin or any church property. The judge looked at the file. He looked at Lowell's petition. He looked at the powerful men in front of him. Sheriff, the judge said, his voice hard. I see no new evidence here. Just the ramblings of a confused woman. Petition for exhumation is denied. Maribel's hope collapsed. Denied. Oswin had won. He was too powerful, his lies too deep. Lowell walked her out of the courthouse, his face grim. He beat us, Maribel whispered, defeated. He beat the petition, Lowell said. Not us. Not yet. We need new evidence. Something he can't spin. They returned to the station, the mood bleak. Maribel sat at a desk, holding the locket. I'm still watching. It was a taunt. The station's front door opened. A young woman stood there, holding a backpack, Trina, from the bakery in Oregon. Maribel! Trina rushed over. I was so worried. You didn't answer your phone. I took the first flight I could. I did some digging. Like you asked. Trina, you shouldn't be here. It's dangerous, Maribel said. So is he, Trina said, her voice firm. She opened her laptop. You said his name was Oswin. I'm good with archives. He wasn't just at St. Jude's. He was at a parish in Ohio in the 80s. And another in Pennsylvania in the 70s. And in both places, a young woman connected to him either ran away or was sent for spiritual care. One of them, a woman named Clara, is still alive. She's in a long-term care facility. Her family said she's been nonverbal for 40 years. A pattern, Lowell said, leaning over the laptop. He's done this before. That's not all, Trina said. She pulled up a grainy photo of the Jane Doe grave. I looked up the church records. This Jane Doe, she was buried with a small, personal effect found on the body. A simple wooden cross. The church inventory lists it. Maribel gasped. Cassidy's cross. Her father made it for her. It was a specific type of wood, olive wood, from his trip to Jerusalem. I'd know it anywhere. Lowell grabbed his coat. That's our new evidence. They didn't just go to the judge. Lowell called the state police. With a pattern of abuse, a new witness, Trina, and a specific, identifiable personal effect, the county judge had no choice. The exhumation was approved. 2 days later, Maribel, Lowell, and a state forensics team stood in the cold church cemetery. A small casket was raised from the ground. The lead investigator opened the evidence box containing the personal effects. He held up a small, dark wooden cross. Maribel's hand flew to her mouth. That's it. That's Cassidy's. The investigator nodded. We'll get a DNA comparison from her living relatives. But, Sheriff, he said, turning to Lowell. We may not need it. Our preliminary skeletal analysis is complete. Jane Doe here, she didn't drown. He held up a photo from the forensic file. Her hyoid bone was fractured. This woman was strangled to death. The arrest of Father Oswin was a media explosion. The people's priest was a killer. The troubled nun was a star witness. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming, the pattern of abuse Trina uncovered, the testimony of the woman from Ohio, who spoke for the first time in court, the DNA match, and the fractured hyoid bone. But it was Maribel's testimony that sealed his fate. She sat in the witness box, not as Naoma, the baker, or Sister Maribel, the victim. She was just Maribel. She told them everything. About Cassidy's pregnancy. About the diary. About the black rosary bead and the smudge of mud. About the 30 years of silence and the 30 years of guilt. When she finished, she looked directly at Oswin. He was a small, withered old man now. The power was gone. He couldn't meet her gaze. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. After the verdict, Maribel didn't return to Oregon. The bakery was part of a life that wasn't hers. Instead, with the massive settlement from the church, which was desperate to contain the scandal, she bought the old convent. She didn't tear it down. She rebuilt it. It became the Cassidy and Maribel Center, a safe house for women and men escaping abusive power structures, a place where their voices would be heard. Lowell, who retired as sheriff, became its head of security. Trina moved to New York to run its public relations, ensuring no story was ever buried again. On the day it opened, Maribel walked to the cemetery. The Jane Doe headstone was gone. In its place was a new, marble one, Sister Cassidy. A voice for the silent. Maribel placed the small, wooden cross on the grave. The silence is broken, my friend, she whispered, the wind carrying her words over the hill. You are free. She turned and walked back toward the center, not a ghost, not a victim, but a survivor. She was 70 years old, and for the first time in her life, she was finally, truly, Marbelle. Please like and subscribe for more stories like this. Thanks.